Welcome to Unselfishly Me, a podcast all about self-love, self-care, and everything in between. I'm Jane, a personal trainer with a focus on self-love. Each week, we'll be chatting to someone about their self-love journey, how long it took, and what it took to get there. Today on the podcast, we have such a special treat. Lauren Sharp, who is Flow With Your Design, Human Design. You guys know I love human design. She is going to do a live human design reading for me. So I have done my human design twice before with two different friends, which you've heard about on here. And now she's doing a level 2. So she's going a little bit deeper, which is a new offering that she is doing, which I find so fascinating. I was like, Lauren, listen, we need to do this, but I think it's going to be cool as a podcast so people can actually hear how you do these readings, what you talk about in these readings, and to also get to know you because she hasn't been on the podcast. So I thought it'd be really cool to do that. It was phenomenal. If you have done your human design and had a reading, like a normal reading, this is such a nice deep dive into that. You go a little bit deeper, and she's even started introducing cards, which, you know, I love a card. I love a card reading, which is such a new thing that she's doing that it came to her in a dream. So it was definitely a download that was meant to be for her, and you'll hear her choosing cards for me. We chatted afterwards about it, and as we were talking, it was just bizarre how accurate it was with my personal life right now. So if you haven't done your human design, you need to do a reading first, and then you can always go into this next step, this level 2 of it. But it is so fascinating. It is life-changing to do your human design, to know who you are, why you are like that, how you're meant to be using those strategies and your energy type to actually lead a better life, to be more true to yourself, to be authentic, and to I like to say live your best life and be the truest form of yourself, you know, not trying to be who you think you're meant to be, but be who you want to be and who you are meant to be, not who you think you should aspire to be. So to be your true authentic self. So I'm so excited to introduce Lauren Sharp to you and for you to hear all about this incredible reading.
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through your charts in the level 2 reading of human design that I offer. So in the first reading that we had, we looked to understand your energy type. We also looked at your incarnation cross, your body graph. We looked at some channels. So we discussed the sort of holistic beingness of being a manifesting generator and everything that encompassed for you individually. And because human design is so bespoke, you know, there's like, you can watch videos, you can research, but when you really want to understand yourself, it's like astrology, you've got to dive so deep. And it's such a deep pull because even at this stage, I would love to be able to offer a level 3 reading, but I can't because a lot of my clients haven't even got to the point of having level 2 readings to integrate. So at some points, there's also level 3, and that even goes further into your beingness. So it's quite wild, actually.
Exciting, yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with what we look at is here is the variable arrows next to the head. It's like, what are those arrows talking to us about? And we've got the arrows on the left and the arrows on the right. And they work in the order of saying top on the left-hand side, if you're looking at your body graph, top left arrow 1, bottom left arrow 2, bottom right arrow 3, top right arrow 4. So it runs in that order. And how Ra explained it was that when you tackle them 1, 2, 3, 4, even when you get to 1 and 2, 3 and 4 just start happening by themselves because you're already accessing yourself. One of his biggest quotes was that even if you were just working with your authority and your strategy in your chart, you would actually already be pretty much like in flow with the variables. You wouldn't even have to go deeper if you're really in your truth around honoring your authority, moving with your design. So it's quite interesting. And you'll notice as we go through this, these are things that we do and feel about stuff almost unconsciously, you know, like when you're sitting somewhere and you're like, I can't sit here. This place doesn't work for me. Like, it's not comfortable. And then you want to get up and you move and you're just like, I can't be in this office. Like, it's just, what is it? It's your design, your genius saying to you, your intuition, we cannot function in this space. And the more in tune we are with that, the more louder it screams. And so we think that sometimes we're going crazy, but actually all we're doing is trying to find our energy space. It's like finding our power spot, and then we can be in that spot and we can be in our power. And that's the focus of it.
Okay.
I mean, we all want to be in our power.
Yeah. It makes sense because even like my friend who's a projector, like yourself, she always wants to meet in like a busy coffee shop, and because I'm the MG, she's like, come, let's meet, I need to power up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and then she wants me to meet her, and also in like busy coffee shops. But sometimes I'm like, it actually happened the one day. I said to her, I'm feeling those girls over there. There's something going on with them because of my open spleen. I was like, there's something going on with them. I suddenly feel so anxious, and I don't get
Yes.
anxious. And I was just like, this place is too busy. Crazy.
And interestingly enough, that has to do with our environment, actually. And that's what I'm going to go into, because
Yeah.
she could be a projector with a market environment, and her markets could be big markets. And, yours will be a different market. So, how she kind of feels in her zone. Mine is actually removed. So I've got a mountain, and mine is more recluse. So it's like, leave me on top of my little mountain. That's why I like to be on the second floor. I've got to have my meditation room in my office. My door is to be closed. I'm just like, leave me alone. And I'm not, and when people meet me and they know me, they know that I'm not actually an introverted sort of person. But for me to be in my zone, that's where my zone is. So her zone's obviously in that place where she's getting activated as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Oh.
So we'll start with your digestion, and this is how your body is responding basically to the energy that you give it. Like food is energy. I always say it doesn't matter, what we eat is our responsibility, but how does that chi energy move through us? So when we first looked at your rest and digest, we said, here is a energy center, Jane, that needs smaller meals, practice intermittent fasting, like just allow your body that time to digest, and that was because that arrow on the left hand side was facing right. And when the arrow faces right, or any arrow next to the variables by the head face right, that means it's passive. So passive is always slower, and active is more active. Hence the digestion there. We would say, okay, let's make this smaller. Let's reduce it. Let's give it time. And because the arrow underneath that is then pointing to the left-hand side, there's also that ability to keep structure and routine, having meals that there's structure around it. It's easy for you to stick to a diet. It's active, it's ingrained, and that works for you. So does cleanses and fasts. And then the activity that you can best reset your body in is that activity of walking, taking time out, but actually moving your body, because you have that active aspect in your chart. So if we go deeper into this, we see that you have touch, buzzing touch, as your sense here. So if you look at buzzing touch, and we say, what does that mean? Well, do you touch your food?
Yeah, I like when I have friends that eat pizza with knife and fork. I'm like, I'll eat the actual slice. Yeah.
And when you shop and you pick up food and you're holding a bottle of water, or what did you experience when you do that?
Yeah, I actually have never thought of it, but I do tend to touch things a lot.
And you would
I want to see, and I look inside the packaging and things like that.
Yeah, so think about that for a moment, because that's quite important, because that is quite, that's your determination. Like, it's part of how you made it up to touch, you made up to touch your food, you eat with your hands. You also, there's this atmosphere around when you eat. That's also important. And they refer to that atmosphere as a slightly buzzing atmosphere. So it's not like that it has to be in this busy restaurant, but an atmosphere around that would be family are sitting at the table. There's a bit of a vibe. Maybe there's a little bit of music, or there's just this feeling around when you're eating. If you think about the times that you've enjoyed the meals the most and you felt the most satisfied, it's been when there's been a bit of a buzz around it,
Christmas, like our Christmas Eve dinner, and then you've got the Christmas music playing and things.
Yes,
like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And always,
So
even the TV, we usually have the TV on, which
Yeah.
is probably not great,
Yeah,
but
it
it
is.
makes sense for me. And even growing up, it was always like the TV was on when we were eating. So that is
Yeah.
obviously why I'm meant to have that.
Yes, and that's why we can't really follow the norms around. And this is what human design starts to make us do, to individuate. Where we say like, that's your norm. My norm is calm, for instance, and yours is buzzing. So for you to digest better, that helps you. You also have, it's for you here, it's about the ajna. A lot of your variables are about the ajna. So your third eye vision is really dependent on atmosphere, on how the inner vision, so like the atmosphere around what you're eating, the touching and the feeling of the food, like, like touching it with your hands, enjoying it. And that will start to open up this inner vision for you, because that inner vision is also related to, and I don't know if you do, but how do you find that you differ between daytime and nighttime eating?
I just went out to dinner for the first time on Tuesday and then on Thursday with friends. And my one friend was like, "This is the first time we're going out at night together." And I said to her, "But I prefer going out for lunch than going out for dinner. Like, I like to be at home on the couch with some tea, like in the evenings. Like, that's what I prefer. I don't like getting home at 9 o'clock. I'm like so tired." So I literally said to her, "I prefer going out for lunch or for coffee. Like, that for me is better than the night." So does that make sense for me?
Yeah, it does. And also, I would also say, like, play around when you're intermittent fasting, play around with intermittent fasting where you're actually like fasting during the day and you're eating at night, and then play around with the two and see which one works better for you, actually, and that feels more in alignment with yourself. There's the alchemy of food, which becomes the transference of what happens when you're not really feeling yourself and things are out of whack and stuff, and you're just not in a good space. When we're not in a good space, our body starts to seek distortion when it is slightly distorted. So it keeps those habits up. Now, the alchemy of food is your transference. Now, that basically means going into the kitchen and experimenting with your cooking and making these things, and just almost like cooking away this like stress of stuff. And like, do you ever do that? Do you ever have that experience of like sudden, like, think about the times it's really been struggles for you?
It's so funny they say that, because when I got an Instant Pot like a few months ago, actually, yeah, it was like probably like April. So, and then I started like, cooking, and because I don't usually do the cooking, Nick does a lot of the cooking. And then I got this Instant Pot because I was like, I can just dump stuff and it'll be delicious. And I don't have to stand there, like, I can watch her because I can dump it all in there and then I can still be with her and it's quick. And yeah, I actually really liked that. And I felt like maybe I was actually more in flow when I was doing that. So I think I need to go back to doing more of that.
Well, the thing is, like, that's the transference. So that's the not self. So when you're doing that too much, you're moving away from the actual experience for you. It's so important you touch your food. And like, it is so important. So that would work if you're busy and you're stressed, but then you're not in yourself. So the actual fact that you touch your food, you hold your food, there's not like a huge amount of experimentation, massive, like just kind of really coming up with things out of the blue. That doesn't mean you can't be creative. That's totally different.
Yeah.
But do you know what I'm trying to say? It's that, like, not really kind of making attention on your meal, on what you're making, because what happens is that you can feel the energy of that, and that energy then affects your inner vision. So it's like that, working with the food in that way, to, I guess, to unlock. It's all about unlocking.
Okay. Touch.
And then environment is the place where we would be basically placed all day, where we're working, the place we need to be focused so that inspiration and ideas can come to us. So if we're in a space and we're not being inspired, we're not getting ideas, move your desk. That's the thing. Like, we often don't think it's that simple, but it's like, what direction are you sitting in? Move your desk. Are you at the bottom floor? Can you be at the top? Are you facing a window? Could you turn it around? All of those things make a difference, because you want to be accessing that space inside of you. But if you're sitting in the wrong place all day long and you're mostly at your desk, it's so important to look at this, because for you, you've got that flexibility, but for other people, may not have flexibility around that. So, yours is markets. And what I found is quite interesting is that in markets, there's always this place of exchange, an exchange of goods and services. And your energy works on this exchange of goods and services. So can we exchange? There's an exchange. And that's a market people like to exchange.
And I used to have an online shop. Well, I mean, I do again now, but I used to have an online shop that was like jewelry and accessories and stuff like that, being the MG that I am years ago. And I used to go do markets, literal markets. So it was like standing there. And I actually enjoyed that because I was like always talking to different people and people watching when the people were walking past. It was quite, I like that.
Exactly. And that's because your soul comes alive in that work environment. And for you, the markets are actually urban kind of markets that they call that hardscape urban. But on your aspect, there's an internal, because it's pointing left. It's about, there's that aspect of being internal about it as well. Working from home, the external vision is, it must look good, how it looks, seeing the beauty of it, accessing the ajna. Your seeing and your powers are awakened by eating right, by looking right. The environment needs to look right for you to access your genius, access your powers. And that, because it's a slightly more narrow landscape, it's markets that is a little bit more sort of not as sort of wide. You could say that that's why it works for you to have your desk somewhere where people can still come to you. That it's easy for them to access you, but you don't feel that you're just sort of placed right in the center of everything. You still need to have that bit of space, I want to say, and that like sort of, where you feel that you can still access that. It's not like just like in the throe of this kind of
and like super loud, like can't actually have a conversation. Like I like it to be like, if it's a coffee shop, to have like people, but not like super, like not every single table full and everyone chattering. Like it must be like a happy medium almost.
And that's why you relate when you started your story about going to meet your friend and you were like, oh, this is a bit too much. You were totally in your space and your truth there, because the environment was actually like fairly okay for you. It was just the extent to how busy that market became, that it became too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool.
And when you transfer, so that's the not self of this, and that would be in a valley, narrow. So it would kind of be, let's say, being put on a project with one person in a small space with one person. You'll be like, oh my gosh, am I in jail?
That's also very why COVID is made. Like the whole COVID thing for me was just like, I don't want to be near people. I don't want to go to the shops. I don't go anywhere near people. I just didn't feel, I mean, most people didn't feel safe, but like for me, I was just like, I'm not sitting inside. Okay, I'll go for coffee with you. Let's go for coffee. But like, we're going to an outdoor venue. I'm not sitting inside. And I've like kind of stuck to that. Like, I just love being at coffee shops outdoors now. And I think that's also because I just feel like closed in with people.
Yeah. And especially because when you're in that not self, like it's almost like, what could be the worst nightmare if you were out in the world working and your boss puts you on a project for people who have this, same as you being put on a project and your boss saying, oh, you're going to work with this person and you're now going to sit in this very narrow, small office over there. Although you can see out and stuff, this person's your main person, you work on this project, that person's going to be like freaking out. And yeah, it'll just go to shit, basically.
Yeah. We'll both be like, what
is so, sometimes we think we're being crazy and difficult, and then we're like, oh, maybe it's the person's got a weird energy, but maybe it actually just is like part of the truth that setup doesn't work for us. And that's why know thyself, so that we can own ourselves and not to just ignore the self, just simply own it and say like, that situation is not good for me. It's not healthy.
Do you think that's also why some people with working from home for COVID, some people hated it and some people thrived and didn't want to go back to office?
Totally, because some of those people had either like narrow valleys, and they like that I was enclosed, or caves. Caves is another environment, and caves would work well for people who enjoy being kind of alone in a small little area, and they're happy just to be at home and not have to deal with the hubbub.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
interesting.
And then your perspective is active. It's a focused perspective. The view that you hold here is a view of possibility. So when you're in your truth and you're in that space, it's like, what are all the things that can happen? And it's not like that there's any fear here involved. It's like the possibility of what can happen. If I do this, this is in flow. These are the things that can definitely possibly happen. And it's completely in your alignment. Where the transference, the not self of that, is when the brain goes, this is what will probably happen. And it starts with all the probables. This will probably do this. This will probably do that. But because possibility and probability sit so close together, that it's so easy for them to flip between each other. And then you're thinking, oh, but then that thought is possibly the possibility, not not the probability.
Yeah.
So you got to watch that inside of yourself, because it's actually so close for you. Other people have theirs much further apart, but yours sit very close. So if you're really feeling something, and then you start to notice that you are leaning in towards the fear of it, maybe write it down and actually divide it into a column to see, is it a possibility or a probability?
Okay.
And which one is it leaning more into? And which one can you let go? Are you seeing the healthy negatives, or is this actually a fear aspect of the not self?
Just a quick little interlude here. If you're enjoying this episode, I would love to reach a lot more people and help them on their journey back to themselves. So if you could do me a favor, and most of you are listening on your phone, can you just press pause and head to the share button and send this to a friend that you think might enjoy it? It really does help me to reach more people, and it helps me to be able to help them and for them to then carry on their journey of self-love. Thank you.
You also, your aspect is that you've got the belief that there's a greater than force than me, and when you transfer into like, I'm not so sure there is there? And then when you're in that flow, you'll be like, yes, because when I release control and I just allow myself to just go and flow, look at the things that happen to me, and there is definitely a greater force, and whatever we're going to call it, there has to be an energy that is greater. And so your message, your drive will be around that, in that space. And that gives others that invitation to connect with something other than themselves and that greater. So that's also ways that we can assess where we at, in terms of like how we feeling about that as well. And the important thing is that, because when you're in that space, what you're allowing yourself to do is you are allowing things to happen. You are telling yourself you're dynamic and you're allowing them to come in. It's like that. It's perfect.
I need to let go. I know. It's hard being a control freak.
I just put the words there,
I know. I'm like, I need to allow. That's my new word. Allow.
Yes, or release are good words, and releasing to the possibility, that's a way of like a beautiful way, because then you're in that flow, knowing that there is a greater force and it will come to me. And I've got sort of similar aspects kind of mixed up in yours when I checked mine. And, this is also something for me too. So I have to, I don't know how it's going to turn out. And I'm just like, and then I'm like, okay, Lauren, just release control. There is a greater force at hand and it's guiding you and it will be okay. Which is not easy. So
we try.
Yeah, support club here. And then your motivation, that's how you access your drive, you find your purpose, and for you that, what I'll start off by firstly saying is that when we see people in the world, we often see them in their transference, not in their truth of their motivation. So we have bad examples of, power and need and survival. And we look at it and we're like, whoa, those are scary things, right? Now, yours is desire. And you have to allow yourself to access your healthy desire.
Okay.
And you are allowed to desire. So, because as soon as we start to feel those feelings, we're like, ooh, we're like, we're not allowed to desire. Like, what does that really mean? And is that unhealthy? Is that materialistic? Like, what is that? But when you access desire, and it's good to look at what the word desire means, right? Because there's a motivational force in it. You allow yourself to feel desire. What does that desire do? It creates an energy in you which drives and propels you. That doesn't mean that your actions are going to be anything but pure, because you're driven from a pure force. Like, what is it that you truly desire? What is driving you? The tone of this for you is a slight judgment. Can I trust my judgment? I'm in charge of figuring this out. Like, am I in charge of figuring this out? But you've got to say, like, I can trust my judgment. I know that my judgment is right. I'm feeling into what I desire, and I'm actually moving with that with confidence. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
So desire needs to lead you. And in that space, because of the direction of the arrow, and I've also got this too, it's that we need to surrender to following, in a sense, but following our desire, right? And I've got personal. So what's interesting here is that they'll say, give up the desire to lead, give up the desire to follow, just give up that desire, that where it's like saying, like, where you've been taught that this is how it needs to be. It's like, can you give it up? Can you surrender to it? Can you follow it? And then when you're following it, what will happen is you start to own it, and people start to follow you, and you're a natural leader, and people will want to be led because you're being led by the right space. Okay. And the interesting thing is that I won't see that you're led by desire, because we experience individuals as portions of ourselves. What I will see in you is I'll see my motivation. How crazy is that?
Whoa.
I know. So that's like next level, like frequency stuff of like behavior and energy, because you will be totally in your truth. But if you asked me, what are you doing? I would speak from my space. I'd be like, Jane's following her personal journey, because mine's personal. And I'll be like, wow, she's inspiring me to like follow my personal journey. And someone else who's in need, they're like, she's accessing, she's in that space where she's in that flow. She's got everything she needs. She's seeing the need. She's following that. And so that's why it's such an interesting thing. Like,
and with that, if people are seeing you like that, because not everyone will see you in a good light.
Of course.
So when people are envious of you, when they look at you, is it because they're seeing what they want?
In their transference. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite radical.
Wow.
I know.
I've got an instance I'll talk to you off air about. Yeah. Okay.
I know. It's like, it gives you these like truth bumps, and you're just like, what? When I heard that, I almost felt like crying, because when I'm in my transference, my negative is power. And like, I'm like, why do these people have power? Like, how do they have power? Like, I know I can lead. I know I like, and so I focus on this power. And then when I'm in that truth, it flips to personal. And it's this like play. When I actually looked at this and I understood it properly, it was like, I was like, sure. So whenever in my head I start to think like about power, I know I'm transferring, and I bring it back to personal. And it's actually the weirdest thing. It's like a slider. I can slide it back and I'll go, what does this mean to me? So for you, it's like, but is this what I desire? And
So
you just,
when I look, it would be like me looking at someone's life, say on Instagram or whatever, or they posted something, and then I get like this funny feeling. Is it because
yes,
I would be going like,
that's not what I
it's almost,
desire.
yeah, okay.
And it'll be triggering something in you around
Yeah.
desire. And if you're looking at what to drive you forward, you know, your whole aspects of your variables always bring me back. All of them are bringing me back to this, like Jane, third eye, Jane, third eye, third eye, third eye. And it's like it's crazy. It's like, you're going to eat right, you're going to access your third eye. You're going to sit in the right space, you're going to access your third eye. You're going to have your view as being possibility. Here it shows me the third eye. And then the last one, it says, you know what, when you act out of desire, what will happen is you will be in your sacral. You'll be in your authority, because that's what it shows me. So it's like you'll truly be acting from a place of truth, which is quite radical. Your transference, though, here is innocence. And in innocence is, and it's not that like per se of like that, it's like that not being innocent, but the transference is that in innocence, there isn't a knowing. And for people who have that as a main aspect, for them, we say, like, don't worry about desire. Don't be led by desire. Like, it's okay not to know. Be in your innocence, access you, and that's a different. So when you start to go into that, it's okay not to know, and just know that ooh, I'm transferring. Okay, let's go back here, back to my desire. What is it that I desire?
Is that why I'm quite good at manifesting? And like I'll have like even on my desk and on like on my walls, I'll always make like a vision board, and like I like to just always look at it and say the affirmations, and on my phone and things like that.
Yes, and because all of us are so different, there's so many aspects of your chart, and because you're kind of living what you're doing, and you've been given the opportunity to be in that flow without restriction, and nobody's told you that it's woo-woo nonsense or anything, you've completely surrendered to it. So you're actually living more of your design than you realize. Yeah. And for somebody who's first entering this, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I want to be like that. They totally can be like that, but the process to get there, they just have to realize that it's that trusting in the self. And as soon as they start to think one way, go the other way, trust your sacral, your authority, your strategy, your energy, honor it. And you've been honoring it without even knowing intuitively for years.
Yeah. Wow.
So the next part of the reading, so we've got this now goes into circuitry. And that's your channels. And then we look at what the tree of life was showing me in terms of where the energy centers that were kind of coming up that needed a little bit more attention. And we'll go into that. So you had 3 channels active. And in the reading that we looked at with your channels separate, we saw that these channels, they had a very interesting story to tell us. And they told us a story about someone who is curious, someone who's seeking, because the 11 to 56, ajna to throat, that's about, I'm here, I'm receiving ideas, I'm sharing my take on life, I'm bringing them through. It's like, there's things in the unseen, I'm connected to my creativity. I always feel like with this channel, it's hard for individuals, I have this, who have that, not to almost be so forced to be in the intuitive and the esoteric. It's like it forces you. It's really hard to ignore it. Yeah. Because that channel's continually like, hey, knock, 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 knock. And then you're like, what? You're like, oh, have you seen this book? Have you looked here? Have you thought about this? And then
cards.
These cards, and and you believe in the imaginal, and that's the job of this channel. It's here to share that with the others and to activate them, because remember, the individual who only has the 11 or the 56 and those are hanging, they're waiting for the others who have the other aspects to reconnect them. So when we have this conversation, those who are listening, anyone who's sort of taking it in, when they have those hanging gates, they become activated. which is
wow.
how energy works. So energy is transferred over space. So there's activation in that. So there's already a connection taking place without even realizing it.
Wow. I didn't realize that. I mean, I didn't realize that. That's
But it
crazy.
makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes you're in a workshop or you're sharing things and people are like, "Ding," and they feel like, oh my gosh, I feel an alignment. Alignments, those channels. It's like those gates are seeing each other. There's communication energetically. And so, yes, you're here to share. And then we had the channel that said, okay, throat to G center. That's inspiration, 1 to 8. And this is this creative role model, this individual, this voice of self-expression, individual verbal creativity, finding that way to express, that root of identity. And then we have this exploration channel that says, okay, I'm led by my sacral, 34. I'm going to G center, gate 10. So sacral's like intuition, like here we're moving, right? And then G center's like, this is me. G center is all about direction, like my life, my soul, my purpose. And it's like when you master what you love, when you in your truth, when you in your desire, people can't help but be attracted to you. And they're just like, oh my gosh, like I want a piece of that. How are you doing it? So what we see here is we see the different circuitries. We see here a circuitry of the 1034 being individual. We see the 1 and 8 inspiration being individual. So individual means that here it's about your centering, it's about your knowing, it's about empowerment, it's about empowering yourself to do what you want, to make an impact. It's about your knowing, your opinions, your direction, your expression. These are individual channels. So, it's quite amazing because you've got this process of like, I've got these 2 individual channels. I'm processing what it means to me, where my power, where my opinions are. And then what happens? You have a collective channel, the 1156. It's like this collective. It's about the collective. And so then you go, okay, this is me. This is what I have reflected, done. And here's my sharing, here's my right brain. I'm going to share with you these experiences, and you share it with the collective. So in those processes where you're taking time out to integrate, when you're taking time out to reflect on individual, like what does it mean? Because you've got 2 individual channels, you've got 1 sharing channel. It means that you're absorbing that, you're making it your own, you're finding your voice, you're finding your truth, your direction, you're trusting your sacral, and then you're like, hey, collective, this is what I've got. What do you guys think?
Here's my new product. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's quite a beautiful energy space, because you'll know which of those are really talking to you. They can all talk at the same time, of course, but there'll always be one that's like louder at the time, and it's like, hey, collective needs us, and then it's like, ooh, retracting it just a little bit to work out this other stuff. Okay, share.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
This episode is brought to you by us and selfishly me. We have created an amazing legacy book. It is my heart and soul that went into creating this book. Basically, it was all the questions I wish I'd asked my gran before she died. I wish I had this book filled with memories and all about her personality and her life growing up as a child. There are over 70 pages full of questions and some spaces to put photos, and it is suitable for anyone in your life. I've made it quite generic in that you can give it to your brother, your sister, your child, your mom, your dad, your best friend. You can give it to a friend to give to their partner or whoever. Basically, it's all questions that you would love to ask them and things that you probably wouldn't think to ask them. Like, what was your childhood like? Do you remember your teachers? What stood out about them? What is your dream car? What is on your bucket list? Your favorite food, your favorite color? What life advice would you give me? What business advice would you give me? What life advice and love advice? And it just goes on and on. The questions are endless. They really are fun for the person to fill in. They're fun for you to read. And I think it's important that us, as people, as parents, as friends, as children, we fill in our legacy and gift it to those that mean the most to us as well. So if it's something that you'd be interested in, you can head to www.unselfishlyme.com and head to the shop section, and it's called the Legacy Book.
So what I do is, and I started working with this recently, is I discovered, I've had these cards for ages, and I discovered that there were 64 of them, and they're Oracle Dakinis. And I was like having this moment where I had a few dreams and some stuff had come through, and I woke up one morning and I was like, 64 gates, 64 cards, 64 gates, 64 cards. I was like, no way. This can't be true. And like everyone else is like, of course it's true, you know, like, duh, you're like the last to pick this up. So I quickly like ran and I looked at the tree of life and I was like, yes, tree of life, the chakras, it makes sense. The energy is coming through. And so I was like, okay, I'd had this dream. I saw how it could work. And I laid out a spread and I cross-checked it to the body graph. And I was like, XYZ, shared it with like a friend came back, oh my gosh, beyond accurate. And then I was like, okay, next person, tried my husband, tried on me, started just doing it a few more. And then I was like, actually, I have to offer this. I have to include it in my readings, because even if it's like an extra 15 minutes in a person's reading, I don't care, because it's like, it's coming up with the most interesting stories around what's going on. And even to the point where I cross-checked it with a friend who's an astrologer, Meg, and you know Meg, and she checked her charts and her transits, and she was like, what the hell? Like, how is this possible? She's like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So it just seems to be talking to me at the moment. So I wanted to share that. It's nothing predictive, because what I'm looking at is the body graph. I'm looking at the story in the body graph. But because what I'll share with you is planetary stuff as well as elements, you can also cross-check it in terms of transits that you might be going through too, and things that might be happening in your houses. Unfortunately, I don't have such a strong astrological background that I can include that in my readings. So I would say that one has to rely on another source for that. But yeah, I can definitely share with you.
Meg.
Yeah. So just call Meg.
Yeah.
Everybody just call Meg. She's amazing. So your first card is 50 that came up in the set, and it's got the seashells. It's a very beautiful card, and it's all about recall memory, as the card speaks of. You know, it's funny because in the tree of life, and I'll say it's funny, but it's not that, it's like ridiculously weirdly placed, you know, it's like magic here. It was unconscious thoughts for you that was here in the space of the 50. And the unconscious thoughts in the tree of life were surrounding the heart. And it was on the design side of your human design, because 50 sits on the design side of your chart. In the design side of your chart, it's also in the space of your spleen. Now, we know your spleen is open, it's intuitive. It's the only gate that's active in your spleen is 50. So if you look at your body graph, you'll actually see that on your body graph. Do you see that there? And this in human design is linking to Saturn. So in the design side, you know, if we say like, what is the conscious side of our chart? What's the unconscious? The unconscious side of our chart is the design side. This card said, here are unconscious thoughts surrounding your heart's center. This is aspects coming into the spleen, which is fearful. There's Saturn sitting here. And the card was associated with water, emotion.
Sure.
As well. And it was about memory. So it was saying here that memories of the past, emotional longings, you know, in human design, it's a gate of rules and values, you know, whose traditional values serve me and enrich my present and future. And here's this moment where this message came through between these, where it was like both the card and the gate were saying, stop, recollect, take a moment, go into the mind of what you're actually asking, because this question is inside of you, and then take action on that.
Okay.
And there's this sort of communication happening in the space. So I don't know what's happening currently, but that definitely shows the spleen is there's a bit of stuff happening for you, is splenic energy around that.
And isn't Saturn like father figure?
Yes, as well.
Okay.
You're like, And
Ding, ding, ding.
yeah, so sometimes these readings can be personal, so we won't need to say anything more. You can just reflect on that, but I can see by your expression, yes. All right. So 15, that was the next card that came up for you. Actually only had 2 cards, which I found very interesting, because most of the cards I was pulling lately have been 4 on average, and yours was 2, and I was like, it's going to be 4, and there was 2. I was like, oh guys, you have such a sense of humor, don't you? So, and this one says ally, and you can see it looks like a fiery kind of creature. But you know how they always say in the Hindu texts, and you know, when we look at, and even in Tibetan Buddhism, when we look at the deities, the more fierce they are, the more friendly they are, and the more protective they are. So, you know, this is not like a negative. This is actually like you have protection, you have. But what's quite interesting about this card, it goes deeper, because in the tree of life, it was around the environment. So it's like, okay, well, what is the environment here for the individual looking like? And it's placed in the throat. So the tree of life, it came up in the throat. Human design showed the G center, and human design said it was aspects of Venus. And so again, the design side, so the design side, that unconscious being made conscious. But also when we look at the design side, it's like the design side is like, it's a lot of our truth lives there, you know? So if it was on the personality side, you could be like, these are very like happening. I'm like aware of these, but I always feel the design side is like, it's who we like integrating to become, you know? It's like all those things we need to remember, all those things we need to work with, the hardest stuff in a sense. It's like the deeper aspects of us are there. This said to me here, there's this fusion, right? So that fusion was about overcoming lower orders of consciousness, actually moving above that. And that's because in human design, in the G center, this gate 15 was about the gate of extremes. It's about the gate of different ways of venturing into places others don't venture, accepting others who venture into places that are out of the norm in a sense, and having acceptance for that. And, you know, not being afraid to hide, not being afraid to show oneself, not being afraid to speak one's truth. So, you know, that sitting here, that spleen, that fear, the G center, you can't hide, it's who you are. You know, this card says that you have an ally to help you. It's this energy, there's this like, it's like, it also aspects of Kundalini energy rising. And what happens when Kundalini rises, it burns away the lower self and it brings up the higher self, accessing that inner goddess. And that here it's in your throat. So it's like, Jane, like at a point, you're going to have to speak your truth. Yeah. And what I love in human design is that it's linked with Venus. So, you know, and it's in your G center. So here you're speaking the truth. The tree of life is saying like, speak it. It's coming from a place of your truth, your direction, your, you know, where you're meant to go. It's like this, your like trajectory, and Venus is love.
And you're wearing hearts on your jersey.
Yes, appropriately placed.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the message around like those aspects in the body graph and the gates that we're feeling that they need attention. They need they want your attention on these.
So when that comes up, then it's good to like go back to your chart, read those, and actually like tap into it, or like, you know, like lean more into it and see what are you suppressing.
And also check what's going on transit wise for you, because, you know, there's Venus and Saturn. So where are Venus and Saturn touching? And, you know, how is this looking at like these lower orders of consciousness that are being raised above? You know, where is this affecting like my ability to venture out, to accept, to kind of challenge the norm in that space? Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
And that is your reading.
Thank you. Oh, that's so interesting. Especially the cards. Obviously I would love that.
Yeah.
I like that it actually brings your whole session together as well in a nice little tied up bow. Because it's not you
Yeah.
speaking, it's like the cards giving the message as well.
Yeah, and just showing that, like, okay, these are spaces. So, again, like I always say, you got to see what's happening transit wise, what's going on in the houses.
Yeah.
Look a little bit further, because it might be something that's actually, because this is a new way I've been working, it could also be telling you of what's actually just about to happen as
Mm.
well. So this is still very this aspect that I'm working with is still new. So I don't know how
Mm.
the lag time in the astral
Yeah.
mail, you could be getting this astral mail info, like you're spot on. I actually did a reading for my husband, and I find reading for people the hardest, really, really hard. Yeah, if I don't know someone, I find it easier. And all his stuff like that was coming up, it was weird, because I could see all the stuff, and it was about like a cult and learning and stepping out and growing out of his emotional wave and not being trapped by it. And it was a very complex reading. It took me 2.5 hours to prep, because I was like, I had to look at it completely from a binary system, and then what the cards were telling me. And then on Wednesday, we found ourselves at a talk with like this incredible, incredible woman who is like been at the forefront of Wiccan magic. She's 66. She's just incredible. She's traveled the world. And we were in this talk, and she started talking to him and telling him about his past lives. And Jane, I promise you, I sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, everything in the reading that she
Ah.
was saying, it was like, it was so, and I just saw the reading, and I saw the reading he'd had on Sunday and the experience he was having on Wednesday. And I was like, what? So it's like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah.
I love how human design is, once you have your reading, you're like, like light bulb moment, but how it is always so accurate. And people
It
just
is.
don't, until you start doing it, even on retreat this weekend, I was telling people about Meg and you and Janelle. And yeah, it was just, they were trying to find signal because there wasn't much signal there. And we were talking about, I was like, oh, do you know your human design? As you do. And then the one girl did. She's like, yes, I'm manifesting generator. She's a doctor, which is so interesting. But she's a doctor that's into like homeopathy and crystals and all that, which you don't often get. And she was like trying to find signal because her mom, her sister, and her cousin were there with her. She's trying to find signal to find out. She's like, what do you think she is? What do you think she is? We were both like trying to like figure out who that were. And she looked them up. It was so interesting. And then when they start realizing just what you read from the body graph, and that they were like, oh, and then I'm like, you need to have a proper reading, otherwise you won't understand. And it just changes your whole life, because you actually understand who you are, what you're meant to be doing, and how you're meant to be doing it as well. You're not meant to do it like everyone else. And I think that is so important for people to realize.
I think too that I was looking at Google stats like a week ago, and I was looking at like how often human design is searched, some stats or keywords that were searched, just on Google, what countries are searching human design the most. Because I was busy writing an article for Odyssey, and I was looking at like, just information around like where is it sitting opposed to astrology, or, etc. And it's still the most, it's like it has the lowest like peak of interest, the lowest amount of keywords looked at. You could see like that people were searching very basic stuff, mostly in Europe and Eastern Europe. Austria, Netherlands seem to also be very popular with human design. South Africa, very, very low, and the rest of the world, like super low. Even America was also surprisingly quite low on stats. And what I found very interesting is that it's going to take off.
It
I
will.
know it's going
Yeah.
to take off. It's going to be the next big thing next to astrology, and people are going to be completely taken by it when enough people that trajectory hits, right? And I think that being ahead of the curve as we are in this point, it's like it puts one in such a different position
Yeah.
through understanding of the self versus like kind of everybody jumping on board in the next like 6 or 7 years. So I say to everybody, like, get onto it now, because you can access the true magic before it becomes commercial.
And by then you can do your level 6 with you.
Yeah, you'll just be
You're
like,
like, "Ah,
you'll be like on this like seventh chakra vibration. Like
ascension."
things will just be coming to you. You'll be flowing with life. Everyone will just be like, what's going on? Because 2027 is coming here. And we
Yeah.
can't deny that. Ra said, this is what's preparing us for it. So
Ah, no, I should
human
have started.
design is paving the way for 2027.
Okay. I'm
So
researching all the stuff. I'm writing down that I should research my keywords and Google Stats for like angel readings and all these things and
yes, you
self-love
should.
stuff.
You can even look at what provinces are searching the most
Mm,
and have the most interest.
yeah.
It's very interesting to look at that. I was very surprised. I thought human design would have a higher uptake than what it currently
Yeah.
does. But I think it's because it is complicated in a sense,
Mm.
and people don't get it when they look at it initially, and they just think like it's either just like someone talking shit about making things happen for us, and things don't happen easily because we're in the mindset of our father's father, which we have to work hard, we have to suffer. And 2027 comes and we're in this new age where our conscious thoughts become reality and we can manifest easily for ourselves, and the whole shift of our paradigm, our astrological shifts, like, and this whole new dimension we move into completely. And it's not even that it's another world, it's that the energy frequency is different.
Yeah. And if you really know yourself on this level, then
Yeah,
you'll be more in tune with, and you'll be able to feel the energy, the difference as well.
totally. And tap into it to know how to reach your clients or how to talk to them. And yeah,
Well, I'm excited.
I know. I'm just like, I'm ready for 2027.
Is that why you've been posting so much on Instagram now? I see you. I've been
Yeah, I
watching
know,
you.
I know, I know. I have been. I have been. I've also decided like it's actually time for me to step out of my cave a bit. Not my cave, my mountain, my human design mountain. I need to.
Make at least one friend on Instagram,
Yeah, I need
One
to be
friend.
seen.
I love it. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh, I'm like so proud.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
This has been
Thanks.
so amazing. I'm so excited to share this as a podcast with all of you listeners out there. And then we'll post it on YouTube as well. So yeah, thank you for this. It's been incredible. I'm gonna do an angel reading for you and send you
Oh
an angel.
my gosh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Thank
Well,
you.
see, we're doing our what was that thing? Bargaining. We're
Yes,
bargaining.
yes, the
I'm
exchange,
gonna
the market exchange. Yeah.
yeah. We in the market.
Yeah.
We're here in our little market with our little baskets and we just
And I
bantering
think
around.
one last thing I'd love to say is that
Yeah.
when one understands how the environment works, they can better understand how to interact with each other.
Yeah, yes. And you appreciate, I'll say one thing too, you'll appreciate your friends and your
Yes,
coworkers and your family. So
totally.
Lauren knows Meg and I very well, and she knows our charts, like she knows us like inside out, literally. And when we were in Egypt, I mean, it's the first time we're traveling together, and we're going to like a different culture, and our human design and astro is so different that we reacted to things differently. Also, we had different lands. Like it was Mars for me, so it was like we both knew it was going to be hard for me, that energy, and then hers was Venus, so she was like all floaty when she arrived, and I'm like, I feel like I'm being suffocated. This energy is literally like vibrating me from the inside. It was like hard energy, but we understood each other from an astro point of view and human design as well, that it was so nice. We had such good conversations where if you didn't know these things, it could have been arguments, like massive arguments, like gone home and resented each other and thought, I'm never going to go on holiday with her again. And we actually, and she even said, she was like, we were like talking in the car, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I actually should have said that differently. And she was like, so glad that we can talk like this. Like, it's making me emotional that we can actually have these like mature conversations, because it could have been so awkward. And I'm like, no, but your chart is like this. So I understand why you're like this. And then she said the same thing to me. It was so nice. It was like the most mature conversation I've ever had in my life. Whereas if you didn't know that, it would have been conflict.
I totally agree. Like I also feel that human design has saved my marriage so many times because it's allowed me to understand my husband's chart and just understand his emotional way of where he's at, try not to be reactive because I'm so open. And and just bring a lot of acceptance. It's not like denial, it's just simple acceptance and love and compassion, and understand that that person's experience is their experience. And we're also looking for different ways of understanding each other, and understanding and accepting, and it's another way of understanding and accepting. Like you said, you can just hold that in a different way and be like, oh,
yeah,
it's just so beautiful.
It's really nice. It helps with no conflict. There's healthy conflict, and then there's which is a conversation. I feel like a conversation, and then there's a conflict. We don't need conflict, especially not on Mars, on the Mars land. It's not not ideal. Oh, I love it. So please, can you tell everyone your Instagram, and where's the best way to contact you? Is it on social media? Is there an email or website? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, and my Instagram is at Flow with Your Design. So flow as you would with your design, Lauren Sharp. And I can be contacted also via email. So my email is just Lauren, Lauren, and then EVA, my middle name, and my surname Sharp, SHARP, at yahoo.com.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm so excited. And if you have never done your human design, you have to start level 1, and then you can get to this interesting, super deep, super interesting level 2. And just contact her, go follow her. She's posting so many things now. It's amazing. And there's so many that are already there that you can go, once you found out what you are, you can start looking at it and then book a reading. It's fascinating. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Unselfishly Me. Follow us on Instagram at unselfishlyme, and check out our website www.unselfishlyme.com.